Hello, good morning. I woke up very late today because I had a very bad night. I was feeling a lot afraid. I am intending to take a test, and a part of me feeling a lot very afraid, and I'm acting out with a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms. Like I'm drinking a lot of caffeine right now. I had attempted to make an Americano, but I don't know what kind of coffee it is right now. But I have used a huge amount of coffee beans. This morning I will read the next edition of Thinking Fast and Slow. Let me find the book. My timer. Okay, the timer is on. Most surprising discovery made by Mr. Screw shows, as he puts it, that the idea of mental energy is more than a mere metaphor. The nervous system consumes more glucose than most other parts of the body, and effortful mental activity appears to be especially expensive in the currency of glucose. When you are actively involved in difficult cognitive reasoning or engaged in a task that requires self-control, your blood glucose level drops. The effect is analogous to a runner who draws down glucose stored in her muscles during a sprint. The bold implication of this idea is that effects of ego depletion could be undone by ingesting glucose, and the Baumeister and his colleagues have confirmed this hypothesis. No hypothesis in several experiments. Volunteers in one of their studies watched a short, silent film of a woman being interviewed and were asked to interpret her body language. While they were performing the task, a series of words crossed the screen in slow succession. The participants were specifically instructed to ignore the words, and if they found their attention drawn away, they had to refocus their concentration on the women's behavior. This act of self control was known to cause ego depletion. All the volunteers drank some lemonade before participating in a second task. The lemonade was sweetened with glucose for half of them and with Splenda for the others. Then all participants were given a task in which they needed to overcome an intuitive response to get the correct answer. Intuitive errors are normally much more frequent among ego-depleted people, and drinkers of Splenda showed the expected depletion effect. On the other hand, the glucose drinkers were not depleted. Restoring the level of available sugar in the brain had prevented the deterioration of performance. It will take some time and much further research to establish whether the tasks that cause glucose depletion also cause the momentary arousal that is reflected it. increases of pupil size and heart rate. A disturbing demonstration of depletion effects in judgment was recently reported in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The unwitting participants in the study were eight parole judges in Israel. They spent entire days reviewing applications for parole. The cases were presented in the random order, and the judges spend little time on each one, an average of 6 minutes. The default decision is denial of parole. Only 35% of requests are approved. The exact time of each decision is recorded, and the times of the judges' three food breaks, morning break, lunch, and afternoon break during the day are recorded as well. The authors of the study plotted the proportion of approved requests against the time since the last food break. The proportion spikes after each meal when about 65% of requests are granted during the 2 hours or so until the judge's next meeting. The approval rate drops steadily to about zero just before the meal. As you might expect, this is an unwelcome result, and the authors carefully checked many alternative explanations. The best possible account of the data provides bad news. Tired and hungry judges tend to fall back on the easier default position of denying requests for parole. Both fatigue and hunger probably play a role. The lazy system too. One of the main functions of System 2 is to monitor and control thoughts and actions suggested by System 1, allowing some to be expressed directly in behavior and allowing some to be expressed directly in behavior and suppressing or modifying of others. For example, here is a simple puzzle. Do not try to solve it, but listen to your intuition. A bat and ball cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? A number came to our mind. The number, of course, is 10 cents. The distinctive mark of this easy puzzle is that it evokes an answer that is intuitive, appealing, and wrong. Do the math and you will see if the ball costs 10 cents, then the total cost will be $1.20. $10 for the 10 cent for the ball and $1.10 for the bat, not $1.10. The correct answer is 5 cents. Um, It is safe to assume that the intuitive answer also came to the mind of those who ended up with the correct number. They somehow managed to resist the intuition. Shane Frederick and I worked together on the theory of judgment based on two systems, and I used the bat and ball puzzle to study a central question: how closely does System 2 monitor the suggestions of System 1? His reasoning was that we know a significant fact that anyone who says the ball cost 10 cents, that person did not actively check whether the answer was correct, and her System 2 endorsed an intuitive answer that could have rejected with a small investment of effort. Furthermore, we also know that the people who gave the intuitive answer have missed an obvious social cue. They should have wondered why anyone would have included in a questionnaire a puzzle with such an obvious answer. A failure to check is remarkable because the cost of checking is low. A few seconds of mental work, the problem is moderately difficult. You know, with slightly tensed muscles and dilated pupils could avoid an embarrassing mistake. People who say 10 cent appear to be ardent followers of the law of least effort. People who avoid that answer appear to have more active minds. Many thousands of university students have answered the bat and ball puzzle, and the results are shocking. More than 50% of students at Harvard, MIT, and Princeton gave the intuitive or incorrect answer. At least selective universities, the rate of demonstrable failure to check was in excess of 80%. The bat and ball problem is our first encounter with an observation that will be a recurrent theme of this book. Many people are overconfident and prone to place too much faith in their intuitions. They apparently find cognitive effort at least mildly unpleasant and avoid it as much as possible. Now, I will show you a logical argument, two premises, and a conclusion. Try to determine as quickly as you can if the argument is logically valid. Does the conclusion follow from the premises? All roses are flowers. Some flowers fade quickly, therefore, some roses fade quickly. A large majority of the college students endorse this syllogism as valid. In fact, the argument is flawed because it is possible there are no roses among the flowers that fade quickly. Just as in the batter ball problem, a plausible answer comes to mind immediately. Avoiding it requires hard work. The insistent idea that is true makes it difficult to check the logic, and most people do not take trouble to think through the problem. This experiment has discouraging implications for reasoning in everyday life. It suggests that when people believe a conclusion is true, they are also very likely to believe arguments that appear to support it, even when believe arguments that appear to support it, even when these arguments are unsound. If system 1 is involved, the conclusion comes first and the argument follows. Next, consider the following question and answer it quickly before reading on. How many murders occur in the state of Michigan in a year? The question, which was also devised by Saint Frederick, is a game on the challenge to System 2. The trick is whether the respondent will remember that Detroit, a high crime um, city is in Michigan. College students in the United States know this fact and will correctly identify Detroit as the largest city in the Michigan. But knowledge of the fact is not all or none. Facts that we know do not always come to mind uh, when we need them. People who remember that Detroit is in Michigan give higher estimates of the murder rate in the state than people who do not. But the majority of Frederick's respondents did not think of the city when questioned about the state. Indeed, the average guess by people who were asked about Michigan is lower than guesses of a similar group who were asked about the murder rate in Detroit. Blame for a failure to think of Detroit can be laid on both System 1 and System 2. Whether the city comes to mind when the state is mentioned depends in part of the on the automatic function of memory. People differ in this respect. The representation of the state of Michigan is very detailed in some people's mind. I will stop right here. I don't know why my alarm didn't patch in. I guess I'm inventing some weird English. My English is broken, and I'm trying to make it work. Some of the very interesting ideas that I have read today is like the unwilling system two, which actually um, kind of doesn't allow us to work most of the time, and secondly, the effect of hunger, fatigue, or our physical state in our rational mind, like System 1 and System 2, and as well as the virtue of overconfidence. Like a lot of times, we are a lot of a lot confident on intuition driven decisions, and we make judgments based on them and tend to remain overconfident in that. Um, now, there is a like there is something or trade-off I find here, like whether we should follow the rational mind or whether we should follow the emotional mind. Like why I am holding on to my emotional mind decisions. Like if I am trying to move on from something and that is unhealthy from me, and my rational mind says it is unhealthy, you need to move on as quickly as possible. But the emotional mind is holding on the emotions that it has created for a longer time. So again, like the acts we do based on the emotions, like a lot of times emotions corrupt our decision making capabilities and um, like ways to think rationally and practically. So that's the point I'm trying to make sense. And like overriding system one requires logic, like emotional mind is like mostly driven by urges, our fantasies, or our quirks. Um, and like I can reflect on a very recent idea, um, and very recent event actually, and I was trying to suppress the emotional mind a lot with all the energy I have and all the logic I have, asking questions, very rational questions to my emotional mind, that what do you want from it? What's the logic behind it? Or is there any truth there? And sometimes I succeed a lot, but it's also true I cannot negate my emotional mind's feelings a lot of times too, because my mind is um, probably depleted. That's one problem I have that could be, and another problem is I feel um, I don't know. I mean, I cannot avoid my feelings or emotions. I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way from my own experiences. Like my rational mind tries to follow the truth, um, and but emotional mind is getting manipulated by external events, like um, people who are trying to manipulate using emotions I have for them. And I'm trying to find a middle ground, like or middle way. Like I will not negate my emotions. I will feel them fully, but as well as I will listen to my logical mind and keep some leverage, because When I followed my emotions fully, it didn't work. Even when I followed my logics fully, it didn't work at all. But in terms of life, like mathematics or difficult problems, logic always works. Like chasing a dead horse or um, chasing something that is quite irrational or unrealistic, that doesn't uh, bring good events for me unless more pain, which leads to my um, idea of like um, or addiction to pain. So, anyways, like the parent ball problem and that the story or the book describes, it also quite non-understandable to me still right now. Like they say that the book a bat a ball costs 10 cents less than the bat, and total cost is $1.10. So um, the intuitive mind draws into conclusion that how it arrives in that conclusion is like 10 cents more. So um, the ball cost is 10 cent because the ball costs 10 cents more than the bat. Like total cost is $1.10. One, if I do the math, $1.10, and the ball costs 10 cent more than the bat. That means my intuition is like arriving in the conclusion very quickly that it's 10 cent is the ball's cost, and the bat cost is like 10 $1. But I mean, but the thing is that Kahneman negates this answer through the reverse point. Like total cost is $1.10. So um, because $1.10 is the cost for the bat and 10 cent for the ball. So total cost would be $1.20. I still don't understand it how it happens because like $1.10 is the cost for bat and ball together. Like if I do the math, $1.10 the um, total cost, then 10 cent for the ball. So that would be like $1.20 because the together cost is $1. The correct answer is 5 cent. I need to how it happens. Still don't know, like how it happens. Like because the intuitive mind gives me the answer that $1 is the cost of a bat and 10 cent is the cost of a ball. There's a language issue there, like the bat and ball cost is $1.10. So if I add 10 cent with add, it will be $1.20. But how it derives in the conclusion, hopefully I will check that. But it's true that I go with my intuition a lot of times and fuck up in situations where it is. They require to follow the rational mind, and I follow in the like bottom 50% students who does very badly in this kind of situations. And another thing, Kahneman draws conclusion here, like how closely system 2 monitors system 1's impulses, urges, and rejects that or approves that, like whether I need to respond to someone, whether I need to um, talk with any individual. What is the idea behind system one's responses? Like what, how easily or how efficiently we can manage system one's impulses? Like it's unrealistic to not to respond system one's responses, and it's also impossible to make every decision with system 2. Like I mean, I know people who say or do doesn't give any priority to decision making a lot of times. So they just go with their intuition. I, I also tend to be a strong follower of law of least effort, and there is a part of my mind which wants to work hard, and there is also another part of mind which is very lazy. And the mind that is active or not lazy is being defeated by the lazy part of the mind. And um, that's why like a lot of times in logical situations I score less. Anyways, um, I have been trying to understand it, and I hope uh, we all will reflect on that, and I will reflect on that. I don't know anyone about anyone else to um, work on how to make the mind more active, the tool that I have right now, as well as I'm not taking good care of myself these days because I'm getting a lot anxious and stressed out because of some external stressors or stimuli. So I'm trying to understand or make sense of what is the truth of this moment and how I can make my best possible action, or I would say understanding the trade-off between action and non-action, or right action and non-action. Like I can recall a Buddha quote, like at the end of the day, it's only matters like how gently you have lived in your journey. Like I don't know. I mean that also considers me weak in some definition, but I'm happy to be that. Like I personally believe that if any internal conflict can be dealt with uh, patience and perseverance, um, there would be good result at the end of the day. So I'm getting in the concluding point. I will make conclusion with like um, to raise insight that tools I can leverage to make mind more active and how I can use the logical section of the mind more often. So, thanks again for listening.